Hey folks, welcome to the SGDA Summit 2023 Audio Design and Sound Design Fireside Chat. My name is Anuj. I'll be co-moderating this panel with Meghna, and
Hello.
we're here with Amaryl and Zeta. If you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi. I'm Amerlin. I am an advanced audio artist currently at Shell Games. Been working there for the past 2.5 years, which is also my entire career in games. And I'm currently on the Among Us VR project, but in general, we work on a lot of VR and AR titles as well as location-based experiences. I've been mostly on VR project, and so that's primarily where my experience has been. Yeah,
Awesome. Glad to have you here. For the
good
first
to be
question,
here.
I'd like to ask, what made you interested in this industry and how did you get started?
Yeah, so I think I've played games my entire life. I was kind of raised on Nintendo and JRPGs. I didn't really think of like a career in games though, just because it didn't seem attainable. It also didn't seem the most sustainable. It just didn't seem like I could. It seemed like I couldn't have a career in games because it would be really hard, and it also seemed like there's a possibility it wouldn't pay well. So I kind of like dismissed that dream really quickly. But I ended up getting into music. I actually started. I in high school I was gearing up to pursue a career in music performance, which already kind of dismisses the whole like sustainable career kind of path. But I thought it would be doable. I'd be happy and. Um, Towards the end of my high school career, I kind of realized that I didn't really want to spend my entire life doing orchestral performances. Not that I wasn't loving it, but just that I didn't think I could have. Um, I didn't think that it would be fun to work in classical performance for like my entire life, and I thought I would want to move on to something else. And so in college, I actually studied music technology. That's a kind of newer program that isn't like very common at every university. It tends to be a combination of like recording, engineering, music production, and electroacoustic composition and sound design. So anything to do with like computers and music and like the combination and friendship of the two. Um, the program that I went into was pretty small. It was at San Jose State, and
Oh,
what their
okay.
program looks
Yeah.
like, yeah, from the Bay. Uh, yeah, our program is like really just the Bachelor of Arts in Music, which was like the general music track, where you're still learning theory, arrangement, and learning an instrument, but then you have like a music technology emphasis where you're taking some supplemental classes in technology. Um, and yeah, I kind of just had no idea really what I wanted to do actually. I kind of went into music technology with the interest of audio editing just because I'd done that for fun sometimes and thought like maybe this would be the path for me, and I was just kind of exploring. Um, and yeah, I eventually got to like 4 years later finishing up my degree. Still not totally sure what I wanted to do. I had a bunch of different skill sets from the emphasis that I uh, like the recording and the electroacoustic composition. And I was just trying to figure out where I wanted to go from there. Because, after college, you're kind of looking for a job, hoping to live and make money. Um, and by that time, yeah, still hadn't figured out what I wanted to do. And so I just started doing a bunch of gig jobs while also working full time at like a non-audio related job. And um, yeah, I think I started out doing a lot of recording, engineering gigs, and live sound, decided that that wasn't really for me. Went into uh, looking for like electroacoustic related positions, but electroacoustic composition is really kind of similar to a composition path where you're kind of working a lot of freelance and there's not really like in-house jobs that are available for you. Um, and didn't know how to like how to approach that. And so like as I was job hunting, I was seeing all these like game audio job listings um and I initially had that like reaction of like this is gonna be an unattainable job, like I shouldn't even look. But because like everything else wasn't working out, I like started taking a look and realized that a lot of my skill set actually applied. And so I started off small. I started trying out like jam games in different Discord communities.
Oh, fun.
And yeah, yeah. There's like a lot of jam, there's like a whole jam calendar on itch.io. I think um CrowdForge.io, there was also like that to like find jam game groups to work with. And like it was really
SGDA posts
easy.
yearly jams. We try to do one or two every year.
Cool,
So
nice.
that's cool to hear.
And
Yeah.
audio is always the one where we're trying to find people to do
Really?
it.
That's so surprising. I
Yeah.
feel like every jam game or like every jam that I've like been a part of, like there's always a bunch of audio people, you know? And like I would always run into like I was starting out doing like music for these jam games, right? Like focusing on music and then there would always be like one or two other audio people because we always had a surplus of audio people and they'd want to do music and I'd be like, "Okay, I'll do sound design. That's fine." Um but yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. I was like, yeah, I think this feels good. I think I ended up deciding that the music part wasn't actually for me just because like as I kept doing these like small projects, I would do the music and then I would just not have as much fun writing for like a project or for other people. I think like my education just got in my head a lot about like how music should be, and it made it really hard to write for like anyone other than me.
Right.
Um, and so I started venturing into sound design because I was trying to figure out like would I have more fun doing this as opposed to music. I started doing like more redesigns and just practicing sound design in like different Discord communities, uh, like late 2019-ish. And I think just something clicked there because like I had worked with audio for a long time, right? But something about um designing sounds and game assets instead of like having to write long form tracks or editing or just like editing files for like podcasts or for recordings, like just something about designing something clicked with me a lot more than anything else. And yeah, I it kind of just kept practicing from there, started putting together my reeler portfolio and then started applying to jobs and eventually landed at Shell where I now work on sounds for a living, and it's been cool.
That's an awesome journey.
Nice.
I've
Yeah.
actually participated in the San Jose State. They have the Summer Games Workshop, and I
Oh, cool.
actually did made a game with them. So hearing that you went there
Nice.
makes is
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, I
Cool.
think this, San Jose is pretty active in SGDA as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Nice. Yeah, I regret like not having known about wanting to do this path earlier on because I could have been a part of that, but
it,
I guess it worked out. But
that
yeah.
Yeah, you
it's like that sometimes.
Yeah.
right. And I also really relate to kind of what you talked about, how you can't like, I guess like music wasn't necessarily like the path for you since you felt like you can only do it for yourself. I think like as artists in general, that's like kind of the whenever we like monetize our like art,
Yeah.
whether that be like sound writing or like 3D, it's like, can I do this like for other people or should I like stick to
Yeah.
keeping it to myself? And things like or like as like in the industry you have to like work in a studio and you'll have to like do things that you don't necessarily like think are fun, but yeah, so I thought that was
Yeah.
a really good point that you pointed out there, and I really relate to that.
I'm glad. Yeah, most definitely. Like I think I wish it didn't come to that just because I sometimes wish I could go back to my music and just like improve on it, but I think like it also kind of speaks as like a lesson that sometimes you know, you might feel like one path is the one way to go, but it's also okay to change your dreams. And
Yeah.
um, I don't regret, I think, learning about sound design and exploring that path as well, because I think I infinitely enjoy it more than I would have enjoyed the pressure of like writing music for other people. Yeah, I think don't be afraid to like, if you or like, I think this like applies to any part of your life really, but if you like want to change your job, it's possible.
That's
Awesome.
definitely good to hear, especially for people who may be studying something that they are interested in, but they want to go into games later.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I guess since we're on the topic of your career, what is the proudest work slash moment that you've had in your career?
I have a lot.
That's good.
I'm glad to
Yeah.
hear that.
I think probably one of the I'll talk about two. I guess one of the biggest ones was shipping Among Us VR. Well, we launched the base game last year. And it was the first like longer term project that I had worked on. I'd worked on a few projects with Shell before then, but that was the first like really big one. And then I think just like, I don't know, there's so much I love about that project, I think. Um, I actually didn't play a lot of Among Us prior to working with that team.
Oh, really?
And I fell in love with the IP. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I'm one of the few, I guess.
We
But
had on one of our earlier panels, we actually had one of the lead artists on Among Us
yeah,
for speak with us. So that's
that's cool.
yeah.
This is the Among Us,
This is
the
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 Among
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 Us.
Us
Us Summit.
SGDA summit.
Oh yeah, and that reminds me, there was also a showcase game that had like an Among Us uh gag in it.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I guess it's like this the Among Us
This really is
stream.
the Among Us stream.
Nice.
Yeah, but
Dominating.
I did play Among Us VR, and I thought like the sound design itself was really cool and kind of creepy a little bit because like
Nice.
yeah, because you're by yourself and you're like, oh, is this person going behind me going to kill me?
Yeah,
Or are they going to be
all the
okay?
time. Oh man, like we play it as a team, of course, to like test the game and everything, and every time that's always how I feel. I worked on the audio and I still feel that way. Yeah. But yeah, I think like yeah, everything about that IP and about what we made, like we made something pretty, I hope people feel it's pretty true to the original 2D Among Us, but also something that like works well within the VR platform and is also true to like what Shell Games in general believes in. Love that team. Like that team is so fun to work with. Yeah, and I think like seeing the seeing players' reactions to it was super gratifying because people were so excited about the game. Even people who didn't necessarily have headsets were like wishing that they could play it. And of course I wish that they could play it too. But yeah, I think like there's just so much love that I have for that project and like our entire journey through it and the the like how much it makes people happy. Yeah. And I think like the other proudest moment now that it feels small like in comparison, but I think like any time that like I've gotten feedback from coworkers about like how much my audio like can bring the game to life, that always feels so satisfying. Like that's what our job is all about. And sometimes audio can fly under the radar, like in the face of like a million different priorities and
Definitely.
things to handle. Like sometimes it's just like, oh, like audio hasn't handled, so don't need to worry about them. But when people notice and then they talk about it and comment on it, it feels so good. Yeah.
Kind of like getting your work noticed is always
Yeah.
that's kind of what you want. It's that weird dichotomy of sometimes like some schools of game audio believe that it should be more invisible, but also like without that, it's like a baseline in a good band.
Yeah.
You will notice its absence a lot.
Yeah. Most definitely. I agree.
I'd like to ask the question of how do you make an audio portfolio stand out, and what kind of skills are important to show when applying for entry-level positions?
I think I'll answer the second part first.
Yes, definitely.
Um, Yeah, I think in terms of skills, it kind of varies a little bit depending on what you're applying to, just because there's like general sound designers that are general design sound designer positions, where you're working on primarily asset creation, but you're also implementing. There's also like audio programmers and technical sound designers where you're working a lot more on systems than you are on assets. So depending on which one you're applying to, like this like answer might change. But in general, you want to show that you have strong sound design skills, specifically for games, but also I think sound design skills in film and animation, as well as like recording like all facets of audio. Like those are totally valid. It shows your breadth of knowledge in audio and what you bring to the table. But you also want to show some technical skills. I think it's important to show that because we're in games and you're not just creating sounds or mixing audio, you're also like getting audio into a game, making
Yeah,
sure it
definitely.
functions well. Yeah, then so you want to at least show that you have some interest in implementation. I think more so than ever, like companies do ask that you have some implementation knowledge and experience when you're applying to them. And it's like the sound design role is much less a creation only role and more so like the combination of the two. Um, and so you do want to show that you have an interest in doing that because you're gonna have to. You're gonna have to if you're gonna be in games. Um, yeah, I think even if you're not super strong technically, like I personally was not very strong technically, but I had an understanding of how to use Wise, like the basic skills
Hmm.
of using Wise and audio middleware, as well as like some knowledge of Unity, and that helped like propel me, I think, because I not only showed that I had started learning on my own, I also showed that I was interested in learning more, and that I was open to having that be a part of my job. So, definitely like you want the creative skill set showing, but you also want the technical skills showing. Let me think. Um, yeah, I think, yeah, as far as like what skills you should be showing in your portfolio, those are like the two primary ones. What was the first part of the question again?
Yes, the first part of the question was how do you make an audio portfolio stand out? Because like you mentioned, you saw a lot of people who were interested in doing audio. So
Right.
how can you make it? How can you make that stand out?
Right. I think the first part is definitely like having a reel on your portfolio and making sure it's as impressive as you can make it and showing your best skills. You want to show like what past projects you've worked on if you have any. If you don't, that's also totally okay. I would recommend like having had some like student projects or jam projects on your portfolio just to show that you have an interest and passion for games. Um, but if your portfolio also includes redesigns, that's also like very accepted and very common, um, because you want to show your skill set and how like what your capabilities are. Um, and yeah, I think that's the very first part is like your content. You want it to be the best it can be so that it can stand out among the rest of the applicants. The other parts, which are pretty important, but maybe not as important, I think organization of the portfolio. You should have it be easy to look through your work so that because like hiring managers only have so much time to look through your stuff, and you want to make it easy for them to see your best stuff first. And if they're interested, they'll look at the others, but you want them to see like that really good stuff first so that you can make an impression.
Right, because they're
Um,
going through like hundreds of applications at a time.
yeah,
You want
exactly.
to be you want to present what's going to make them pull yours aside.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Like I think it can be easy to or like it not easy. Like it's very possible that they'll only have like a few minutes in their day to look at portfolios and they have to move on to their other tasks from like projects or manager work. And yeah, you want to land that first like minute with them. Um yeah, I think let me think. Yeah. Content presentation. I would also point to Kevin Regami's Real Talk on Twitch, which is like a really good Twitch stream series that he has going where he reviews portfolios with the same kind of idea in mind of like trying to see what message you're trying to send with your portfolio and reviewing that and seeing like how you can improve it or if it is going to stand out to hiring managers. I think that's a really good resource that you can take advantage of. I think also getting it reviewed by other audio people in the industry. If you know of any, like you can reach out to fellow students, fellow aspiring game developers, or you can reach out to. There's a lot of like audio people online actually on Twitter and Instagram, and like a lot of people are happy to help. And so if you reach out to them, they might be willing to take a look at your stuff and give you some feedback.
Awesome. Thank you for like the really good that was a really good answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really like detailed. I love it. So you did mention like or at least like it was mentioned in your bio that you also outside of your like your work on games, you also work on like indie animated films, short films. So basically, so we had a question here about so outside of your work in games, what interesting gigs in audio, music, or sound design have you taken? And have you learned anything from them that you still use in your current studio now?
Yeah. Let's see. I think some like you've mentioned the indie animated films, like I think working on those has really strengthened my creative sound design skills because in linear media there's no implementation to worry about, and so you're really focusing on making things sound good and in a short amount of time too, I should say. Like the pipeline is a lot shorter, I think, for animation and film than it is for for games.
Right.
Yeah, so I think really honing on my creative sound design skills is where I get a lot of practice in that from like animation and freelance work. I think like the time that I spent doing recording gigs and live sound have definitely been helpful just because like recording engineering and live sound is kind of centered a little more in hardware. There's definitely like a lot of mixing involved too. And yeah, mixing a game is a pretty monumental task, actually. There's a lot of components to look after and listen to over and over. And additionally, as a sound designer, you might also be like field recording and recording your own sample libraries to use in your work. And so both of those things have kind of made their way into my sound design. I think I have a lot of room to grow in field recording, actually. Like I'm not great at the hardware, but yeah, I think like it's kicked me off at least, and it's I still use it to this day. Um, I think like as far as maybe non-audio gigs, actually, I so that time that I was doing some freelance work while I was working full time, that full-time job was actually like as office assistant in two different companies, and I think like the the kind of work that you do as an office assistant has a lot to do with like answering to different stakeholders and managers and directors about like different work that you need to do for them. And I think that like the parallel of doing that work to like games and game audio is kind of actually like pretty close because it's a lot of communication involved and a lot of um a lot of discussing with different directors and managers about like what work they need you to do, and what work you can do for them. Um, and I think just like that whole like client kind of relationship like brings itself over very nicely into games because even if you aren't directly interacting with your clients, your directors are your clients. And so yeah, you have to be good at I guess like communicating about your deliverables, delivering your deliverables, and just like talking about things that go wrong or things that go right.
Awesome. So I think we'll start with audience questions around three. So Anuj, are there any other questions that you would like to ask?
I would like to ask, who are your inspiration and or your heroes in audio design?
Oh man. Uh, um, it's a little hard to say just because I think everyone that I have met is really cool. Yeah. I think like I really look up to I actually so when I was like starting to learn about sound design, I actually was able to talk to two mentors who took their time out of their day to like give me a lot of feedback. And it's like Juan Uribe and Isabella Ness. And yeah, I think like I look up to them the most just because they're like really great people who both are really solid sound designers, and they're also just like really passionate about raising up the next generation of sound designers. Um, I hope to be like them one day, but I think in general, yeah, everyone is. It's really hard to answer this question. Yeah, everyone is really like kind and generous and so smart and so good at what they do. I think I'm constantly trying to learn from everyone, and yeah, I think the nice thing about the game audio community is that they're always sharing their work and always sharing how they get there. So they're sharing like processes, workflows, DAW sessions, just so that like you can also try to do it. And yeah, constantly learning. It's really good to be in this community.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think we got one more question. We can probably get another question in before
Yeah.
3. Magno, if you would like to take the floor for this one.
Oh, okay. Oh, this is a good one. So, what advice would you give your past self when you were trying to get into your first studio or your first audio job, more so? Like pretty much along those, so like what advice would you give to your past self when trying to get a job in games or in audio?
Hmm. Um, I think probably to stress out a bit less. I think when I was first getting into games, I was really desperate for that first offer to come in and really anxious all the time about like my applications and where they'd be going. Like I remember I would talk to my mentors about like what if they don't reach back out to me? What if they don't take me? And they'd kind of say like you have to chill out. Because I think the matter of the fact right now, unfortunately, is that the games industry is very hard to get into. And I think in audio, especially, it can be really, really hard just because there's a lot less positions that are available, even compared to some other disciplines. And then there's a lot of people trying to get into games in game audio. And I think like something that maybe I had in my head but didn't really like feel in my heart was that I like just needed to manage my expectations that like the the job might not accept me and might not get offered to me, and that's okay, and that's not always my fault. Sometimes it's a matter of things like that I can work on, like I can work on improving my portfolio. I can better my interviewing skills or like revise my resume, stuff like that. But there's also like a lot of factors outside of me that can affect my job prospects, like other applicants, or sometimes even the games just don't end up not having budget for audio, which sucks to hear, but it
Yeah.
happens. Yeah. And I think I would probably have told my past self to just like relax a little bit and just manage your expectations. And of course, it's natural and normal to be bummed out when a job doesn't come through. Um, and it's a stressful journey, but ultimately like if you pick yourself up, move forward and keep going, like eventually something will come through. You just have to keep working through it.
Mhm.
And yeah.
Yeah, I think
Awesome.
that's very good advice.
Yeah,
I think like
definitely.
people do it sometimes. I think we get into at least like when I was hunting for internships, it's like you get too much into your head, and then you kind of start to realize
Yeah.
that like sometimes things are like outside of your control. Like
Yeah.
sometimes the games like don't want to hire interns anymore, so they just reject everyone
Yeah.
and stop
Yeah.
or something like that. But yeah, Thank you. Anuj, I guess, do you want to start with the first audience question?
Definitely. Our first audience question was Discord or Twitch is not letting me scroll up very well, but we have it in our own officer chat. I think we had the question of what programs do you typically use answered earlier, but if you want to kind of talk about what you use nowadays, you can definitely do that. And what's your process in making sounds for games?
Sure. So as far as tools, um, like I have my DAW, of course. I use Reaper, specifically at Shell, because that's kind of what we all use. And then I also use Logic Pro, which is what I started on. I still use both to this day on different projects. And yeah, I think like as far as implementation goes, um, it depends on the project. Yeah, I think it's important to know Wise or Fmod or both if you can. And then also important to know Unity and Unreal, just because even if you're not necessarily working on if you're not necessarily working with those tools on a project, like those skill sets will carry over still. And so yeah, transferable knowledge is a good thing. Um, as far as process goes for creating assets for games, I kind of first start out with, well, talking with design and art to see like what thoughts they have about a different feature. And then I'll start out by figuring out what assets I need to create for that feature to make it functional and testable. And then I'll start going into my DAW and designing those sounds. I try to be like really quick about this first step actually, because depending on how things play out in the game, or depending on even how things sound in like the VR headset, which is like what we
Yeah,
primarily,
definitely.
yeah, work with, then how it sounds will completely change how I end up designing it and what I like what my final bounce products are. Um yeah, I think a lot of the times like things might not sound good when implemented, unfortunately, and then I have to go back to my DAW and be like, I need to like add this layer or take out this layer. And so I think like being really like short about your iterations can really help with like doing faster iterations so that you can get to that product a little faster. Yeah, I think I've done like early on in my first couple projects, I was doing like I was spending a lot of time on that first step, like making those first downs before I even implemented. And then what would happen is I would get into implementing, hear it in headset, and be like, this sounds really bad. And then it's like not necessarily time wasted, but but then I'm a little late on like delivering those items, and that's not really good for either me or the project. And yeah, I think like I've started getting into like faster iterations just to be able to get around that. And then once I finally land on the final bounce product, then good to go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome.
Awesome. For our next question, I'd like to ask, what makes a game's audio stand out to you, either in a good way or in a bad way?
Hmm. Um, I think like in comparison to maybe other audio fields, like I think something that I really enjoy about game audio is both the creative and technical aspect of it, and just like trying to figure out all the ways that a player can interact with the world that you're building, or with like a task or like an action that you're building in the game, like trying to figure that out and then making sure that that kind of aspect of the world comes to life. I think that is a really gratifying thing that I particularly enjoy about game audio. I think something that stands out to me in general about game audio that I don't enjoy is how hard it can be for entry level people to get in. Um, and like it's a pretty big uphill climb, and I was pretty lucky that it didn't take me too long to land at Shell, um but it's not the story for everyone, unfortunately, and I think like it's really heartbreaking. Like I don't think I even went through as long as a journey, but the rejections that I did receive, it broke my heart. And I don't know. I want there to be um more internships and entry level positions available for like everyone who's trying to get in. Because I think, well, obviously, like we don't build up this industry from like just mid-level and seniors. Like it all starts somewhere, and it's gonna start from like the entry level and the student designers that are coming in. Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thank
Megan, if
you.
you'd like to ask the next question,
Yeah, so this is actually kind of a good I
it's
don't
a
know
good
if we'll get
segue.
more questions, but it's a good like last question if it is. So this is from Ariana on our Discord. So hi, I was wondering if you knew any additional opportunities for sound effects designers or Discord servers or communities I should look into. I've been doing redesigns and I've worked on several student projects before, which have been really fun. I'm continually sorry, I can't speak.
You're
Editing my
good.
portfolio. I'm continually editing my portfolio and definitely in that super duper anxious stage you mentioned you were in. And they also want to say thank you so much for sharing your experiences. This is really cool.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the question. There's a lot. I'm glad I have Discord open because I have to look through them all.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, it's under our panel chat if you can
oh,
see. Yeah.
cool, cool, cool. Okay. So I think so Discord servers.
Hmm.
I think the very first one that I was a part of is called Blip Sounds. I'll try to also put this into the chat after the talk actually, just so it's easier to find.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, Blip Sounds is a pretty great community. I don't know how long it's been there, but like there's a lot of history of like people giving other people like portfolio reviews and even application advice. They also have like a monthly challenge that they have going where you'll redesign a clip that they choose for you. Sometimes they'll have parameters for the challenge, and then you just like submit your a redesign and then people review it and like talk about how to make it better and give you advice, which I think has been pretty cool. Another one has been the Sound Bites podcast, which it's a podcast and it also has like a Discord server where there's a lot of like professionals uh, and aspiring designers in here that will like talk about they'll talk about tech or they'll talk about sound design. I think it's a little less active, but also a good resource. And then I'm trying to find this third one that I was thinking of, which is by Presley Hines, who is a designer at Brass Line Entertainment, I think. Um, and yeah, a lot of sound design resources here. Uh, there's a lot to get into. I think there's also the Game Audio Slack channel, which I think is headed by Tony Porter now. Um, which like it's there's a kind of a place where a lot of people can go to ask questions about different problems that they're having in game audio, whether that's like projects or just design questions or help with applications and that kind of thing. Um, and let me see. I'm trying to get to the other parts of the question too. Um, okay. I'm not too sure of additional opportunities for sound designers, just because I haven't really like looked. Um, I think like I think a good resource to look into is the sound effect newsletter called Sound Lister, which kind of accumulates all the audio related, like game audio or not. Like they also have like some film opportunities and some podcast opportunities and like just a lot of audio like jobs listed in a newsletter that they release periodically. Um, and that's like kind of a good resource if looking for jobs is getting really hard because then they're looking for you. There's also, I think, a site called DevBrada, which will also do the same thing. Sometimes audio jobs are a little out of date, but I think it's still a good resource for like recent jobs that have popped up. And then Work with Indies is another good one. It's not like audio specific, but it gathers like indie positions that have opened up from all over like the indie studio community for like all the disciplines, and they have some audio ones that come up from time to time. Uh, yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, and as far as like being in the anxious state um and working on your portfolio, I think like if you're willing to reach out to people on like start a Twitter or Instagram and reach out to people there, that helped me a lot. I know it's not for everyone, so take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, I think like if you're willing to reach out to people there, that's a good resource. That's all like a huge like community resource there to kind of talk to about your work and about where to go with your work. Yeah. And if nothing, you can always message me. I am available. And yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
awesome.
We've got one more question before we wrap up this little fireside chat. That question is from Fable Rain, Faith in chat. Any advice for creating game audio that is immersive?
Okay. I think as far as like creating game audio that's immersive, hmm. You would think I would have a good answer for this. Like this is my job, right? Um, I think like creating game audio that's immersive like has a lot to do with just like being familiar um with like your game systems, whether that's like in your engine, in your middleware, and like what the project wants to do, and then being able to like create assets that like line up with that. I think like being like understanding how things get implemented, will really change how you design assets for it. Like you might create something that like loops for like 10 hours, but it doesn't actually fit with the function it's supposed to serve. And so you're going to have to change it. Stuff like that. That's like an insane example, but um, yeah. Um, I think further going from that, um, I think anything that can bring a world to life and almost kind of creating sounds for like anything that could have a sound. Like you might not really often hear like a computer monitor sounding off, right, in real life. But I think even if it seems like it could just be silent, like just add a sound to it and see if it helps build the world a little more. Um, I think additionally, just paying attention to like what the art team and the design team are doing in terms of like uh, designing characters and environment, just to see like what more you can add to your sounds to like make that part of it feel real. Like for example, like a character might have footsteps and you want those footsteps to maybe feel chunky and metallic because they're wearing a certain kind of boots and something like that. Just like adding sound to any little bit that you can to help the world feel alive will make things feel immersive. Um, yeah, I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank
Definitely.
you.
And I think with that, we can go ahead and wrap up this fireside chat. Thank you so much for coming to speak with us. Well, thank you to the audience for the great questions, and have a good rest of your day.
Yeah.
Next up, we'll
Oh,
be
wait.
having. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I was gonna ask if Emerlyn, if you want to shout anything out
Oh,
right
yes.
before we end the stream, because I think we do have a couple more minutes till we have to actually wrap up. So
Oh,
yeah.
sure. I have a Twitter, I guess, at at Eminemony. I am also on Discord, also as Eminemony. I don't know what else to shout out. That's kind of it.
Awesome. Thank you. And sorry, Anush, for interrupting you. You can go
No worries.
ahead.
Totally understood.